MD, one of India's technological company, Kiran Mazumdar, saying that there is a harassment right now by the corporates. We're living in fear, and tax authorities actually need to be less aggressive so that we can live without fear. We can expand in India. We can contribute in the growth.
I have several things to say, but more than everything else, I think I want to remove this perception of harassment and fear and in tax raids and so on and so forth, because there are 70 million taxpayers in this country, and the number of raids that you've heard ever, the highest, is about 1,000. Now that doesn't make for a
in India, we can contribute in the growth.
Of fear and harassment. I have several things to say, but more than everything, I think this is. I want to remove this perception of harassment and fear. In fact, if you know tax raids and so on, 97%. There are 70 million online taxpayers in this country, 93 or 95, and the number of raids that you heard, filings now are online, is about 1,000. The number of scrutinies that you doesn't gone down for a significant.
In India, we can contribute in the growth.
They have also now become randomized. I have several things to say, but more than everything, I think this is. I want to remove this tax harassment.
It is in reality. It's not only Mazumdar Shaw saying that tax harassment is happening. Startups have complained about digital tax.
But filings now have sorted that out. Scrutinies that you doesn't gone down for.
Right. After 2 years, we can contribute in the growth.
They have also now become randomized. I just gave you that number. That of the number of tax filers in this country.
Okay.
But just one other thing.
Okay. Just one other thing, which is that I wanted to say that that there is not the is not the situation that everything is going down, because one must recognize the 6th year in continuation that you've had a subnormal rainfall. The first time in post-independent India, 6 consecutive years that you had a below normal rainfall, and yet agriculture has grown 2.3%.
Rural wages are not growing, Rajiv. Rural wages are again between 2.9 to 3%. In fact, I have a data which is from your think tank, which says that in real terms, between 2011-12 to 2015-16, and this is a report of 2017, rural wages growth is just negative 1.36%. So where is the growth coming? Where is the growth coming from?
The growth that is coming from is from the sectors that has always come from, which is the services sector, and which have shown still are holding up quite nicely. Thank you. And and there is, for example, now you've crossed 10 million tourists, foreign tourists in this country, again for the first time. So that's where its growth comes from. But I'm not contesting at all that we are in the midst of a of an economic slippage or of economic slowdown, which, as I said, we are cognizant of, and we are trying to address. But to paint a picture of sort of doom and gloom as if there is no end to this, I think that's not.
Okay, Pranjal, you speak to corporates. What are they saying?
Right.
Yes,
so Devina, let me address 2 points. One to Rajiv as well. One, let's understand, stepping back, that there are certain things which are happening in the governance system in the country which were essential, and those have contributed to the slowdown. So the completely new tax system of goods and services tax, which has created one tax market out of 29, was absolutely essential, which also means that you really have to shut down parts of it and recalibrate everything. And that transition creates a slowdown. So that's inherent in the change. If we had not done that, believe me, even 6% would have been difficult right now. So I think that's essential. The second cleanup which is happening in the government of crony capitalism, which India has suffered for decades, I think that's terrific too, where banks and capitalists, along with the industry leaders, along with the political leadership, ensured that money was given to just about anybody, and we've reached a level of very high levels of debt in the banking sector. That cleanup is happening, and that is also that's an essential cleanup. But that's contributing to the slowdown as well. But coming back to the tax issue, which Devina, you raised, and Rajiv, you're responding to, what is happening today is a crisis of confidence. Because of this entire cleanup, the trust and confidence between the government and the industry, the bankers and the borrowers has broken down. Everybody is worried about what will be the implication of any decision that I take. And unless that confidence is brought back, unless we do something in the government to say that, look, we are going after the rogues, but we're going to keep you guys okay, that message hasn't come through yet.
Well, in fact, yesterday, the Prime Minister did mention in his speech on the Independence Day occasion of India, saying that the wealth creators from India Inc. should not be eyed with suspicion. Yes. And they are the people who are contributing to the growth of the country by creating jobs.
That was a wonderful message.
It was a message, exactly. And Rajiv, my question to you is, what is being done then by the government? What are the steps, apart from sending the message, what are the steps being taken? What are the consultations being done so that Indian corporates can look at expanding, can look at ease of credit from the bank, can look at creating jobs where the unemployment is at almost a 4-decade high?
Again, one to say what Pranjal was saying. The rules of the game have changed in the last 5 years, because, the fizz that you saw earlier was all about the non-formal, the parallel, the cash economy, which has shrunk remarkably, because in the last 5 years, you've taken measures to formalize the economy. And those changed rules of the game are not yet being grasped by people who earlier had no downsides ever and had only the upside because the downsides were covered by the bank. Now, on what's being done, I think the measure in the budget itself, you saw there are, I think, about 11 specific announcements on improving or on encouraging the private sector to invest, including for the first time saying that even the railways, would have their tracks and the trains itself, etc., opened up to the private sector. But more importantly, you've just seen there have never been ever a consultation with the industry and all stakeholders after the budget. And many people sort of asked me, what's going on?
But Rajiv, what we should do, I think the government should do as a radical measure, do away with the annual budget. I'll tell you why, Devina. Because say that this is the policy and for the next 5 years, we are not changing it and let's go and run for it.
I have to agree with that. I think policy uncertainty has really unnerved people. It's unnerved investors. You go ahead and announce your sovereign borrowings in the budget, then there's so much uncertainty around it, and then there's talk of that the government might discontinue it, and that's only one aspect of it. I think breakdown of trust is a very crucial issue that the government needs to really address, and I'm glad that the Prime Minister spoke on this bridging the trust deficit with the corporates.
The Prime Minister has been so forthright, has been so clear about the fact that he expects the private sector to lead the growth story in India.
Rajiv, my question is why it's not being done till now? Because you have a government which has a stable mandate. You have a Prime Minister who has a business-friendly image. But this is the second term. This is the second term.
70 days.
Second term of the government.
The Prime Minister recounted all that's been done.
Rajiv, okay, what's the logic behind keeping the 0.7% of the big companies of India out of the 25% tax bracket?
When this government came into office, the fiscal deficit was more than 6%.
So you have to choose between fiscal discipline and creating jobs.
Look, the other thing...
And unleashing the animal spirit.
I would just...
Yes, go ahead, Rajiv.
Your statement about the 4-decade high is wrong. Because, that PLFS survey...
That is your government report of the NSSO, and I remember interviewing you on this, Rajiv, and that time the report hadn't come out. But this is the report by the government.
This is a report with a completely new methodology. They are using educational criteria to segregate or to categorize the people they've interviewed.
So you're saying that the numbers are wrong?
I think so, because I tell you why. For the first time now, we are beginning to collect our job numbers from the professional organizations, which have not been covered. The question today to ask in India, because of the change in the nature of the economy, is what are you doing to earn a livelihood?
Exactly.
So what are the options being created?
Not because you are employed.
Okay. So what are the options being created? Because this is not about just the data. I want solutions here. You have options. What are the options being created? Auto sales numbers are at 19-year low. You have crisis in power sector. You have crisis in steel sector, manufacturing sector that you referred to earlier, the industrial output data, the industrial output sector. Sir, the industrial output data shows that there has been a downtrend in the industrial growth. There is a serious issue on the ground. Now, we can talk about the numbers, but what is the solution going forward? What are the areas which the government is keen to focus first, and then from here on give a message that yes, India is open for business?
India is open for business, and India will become better for business. And thank God the India story abroad remains as robust and buoyant as ever. and you attracted more than $62 billion.
$64 billion, that's
64
correct, on foreign direct investment. That's
But let me
correct.
support Rajiv over here, Devina, because if you look at it today, South Asia, Southeast Asia is actually an island of peace and calm and economic and social and political stability. Look what's happening between Brexit and Europe.
What's
Look what's
happening
happening
in
between.
Hong Kong,
Look
Pranjal?
at China and Hong Kong. Look
Yeah.
at China and US, right? So there are crisis and conflicts. There used to be a time we said there were conflict zones only in one or two continents. Now you see it in every continent. Having said that, I think another point I think which Rajiv has said and government needs to recognize that is that jobs, the way we saw it, aren't going to grow. And that's a global
So
phenomenon.
which is the sector that you would pick? Which is the sector that you would pick for creating jobs?
Jobs will not be created, livelihoods and work opportunities need to be created, and for that entrepreneurship is absolutely critical. Unfortunately though, and therefore this is where I have some gripe with the government, is that while we've been talking about ease of doing business for a long while, the ground level situation and the leadership statement, there's a big gap. Entrepreneurship, that's where the animal spirit and the
There are 2
entrepreneurship
points.
comes
Yes,
in.
Rajiv. Yes.
The Prime Minister himself indicated very clearly where the job's going to come from, and that's exports. Nowhere, never earlier has a Prime Minister stood on the ramparts and talked about exports and promoting exports at the length at which he's done yesterday. It is remarkable what
But
he's
Rajiv,
done.
let me just
Hang on,
come in
Yes.
here.
Just a second.
Yeah.
And the second thing about the jobs, which anyway, you go ahead. because-
Yes, your sector
we
is
were talking about-
exports. Shweta has a response to that. Yes,
So
go ahead.
on
Shweta.
exports, isn't the government waking up too late on the export story? Exports are already down by over 10%. Global economy has slowed down. You've done
In
nothing.
June, the exports actually bumped up 9%. But I agree that in the 11 to 18 period, their growth has only been 1.5%. But Shweta, look at the huge change that has been made, which is that the Prime Minister of the country has now for the first time openly declared that exports is the one that to be.
So Rajiv,
and
I'll
he's
tell
talking
you
about exports from
my
every district.
observation and through my reportage, what I've noticed is that there's a huge disconnect between what the Prime Minister says and what gets implemented on ground. There's an entire machinery in between which leads to a huge implementation.
Pranjal,
And that's what also
so
Pranjal mentioned
the
about
minimum
the
governance,
Yes.
the minimum governance as
Maximum
governance
Shweta
and
talking
maximum
about is not happening.
Yeah.
It's
Devina,
not
I wanted
happening,
to
and it was
address
one
that.
of
minimum
his ele-
government, maximum governance is the
not
motto.
happening,
I
and it was
wanted-
one of his
You
key
think
promises.
it's not happening? You believe it's happening?
It's not
Not yet.
happening.
Not
The
happening, and
government
these
is
are
not
people who are on the
disinvested.
ground talking to people. Yes, Raju.
Agreed, because what happens on the ground, 80% of that happens in the states and in the provinces. You see, and there is this gap, and this is what Niti Aayog is trying to do by
But
its
most of the
ranking.
states are also now with the National Hindu Nationalist
but
Party.
it takes time. I mean, I'm just saying that the inertia over 7 decades that has been developed, it's easier to try and change it. It's difficult even in the central government. But where the rubber hits the ground is in the states.
But Rajiv,
And that's where
the
systems
you
are
have
government
also
has been
said-
aggressive
Okay.
about disinvesting.
Okay,
And Niti
so
Aayog has
exactly.
pulled
My
out
question
in-
is about disinvestment that Shweta is mentioning, that you want to create jobs, create revenue by giving out share of the government-owned enterprises to other businesses. Now, Indian businesses may not have that kind of money, so you need to open up the sector to foreign investors.
and
So
therefore-
which are the sectors in foreign direct investment that you're planning to open up?
Therefore, the budget announced the fact that now, hence on, every sector up to 49% would be open to the FDI. And they already